Welcome to the Double D Trailers podcast. Today we're going to be discussing ramps versus step up, which is better. Lots of questions that have come in the last few weeks from our listening audience wanting to know our opinion on that. So we'll try to break it down and just discuss the various aspects. Let's start out with the ramp itself. The advantages of a ramp. So when we are doing our initial onboarding process, we typically do recommend a ramp. All of our models are standard step up optional ramp. Some folks don't want them, some folks do, but I do see less skinned legs and knees with a ramp versus a step up. And then if you have maybe a horse that's an older horse with some joint issues or horses with anxiety, I think loading and unloading with the ramp can be advantageous. On a straight load, I've seen clients walk their horse in, and then when you try to back the horse out, if it's a step up, I've seen that be an issue sometimes. So I do like the ramps in those situations. One thing to point out that I've noticed over the years among different manufacturers, the heights of the trailer. So the step up height, that would be the measurement from the ground to the top of the floor. And if we look at a bumper pull model, I think we're running at like 13 inches, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a really low step height. In fact, I've seen some complaints over the years about the trailer being too low and the jack, wanting to drag on a low vehicle going through holes and such. And so for those reasons, today we generally build most models, even in the bumper pulls, 3 inches higher than normal. So that does increase the height of the step up. It doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine something knee high and then raise it up 3 inches and try to step over it. It makes a big difference there. Just be aware of the height of the trailer that you're looking at. Obviously, if it does have a ramp, and the higher the trailer off the ground, the more steep the ramp is, particularly when it comes to a living quarter trailer. Most manufacturers jack those up a decent amount of clearance and space underneath, and a couple of reasons for that. One, they're generally very long trailers. So if the trailer were really low to the ground, you can imagine trying to maybe go across a train track in a small town. You've probably seen those where the track's actually elevated. You have to go up a hill and back down a small hill. On a really long trailer, if there was not enough clearance, you could actually drag on that. Same thing getting in and out of gas stations or camps and trail rides and things of that nature. So for those reasons, on a long living quarter trailer where you have holding tanks underneath, you don't want to turn into a gas station to fill up and leave the holding tank laying in the highway because it scraped and drug the tank off and broke everything. So almost all living quarter models, I would definitely recommend a ramp. We highly do. Just too much of a step there. When it comes to various flooring types, if you're looking at a trailer that has a rubber mat, whether it's a wood floor with a rubber mat or an aluminum floor with a rubber mat, I normally see horses step up on those without too much issue. The hoof can get a bite into the rubber. Don't see a lot of slippage, although if it's, wet or there's a lot of moisture condensation in the air on the mat, you're not using shavings to keep it dry. I have seen horses slip while loading, trying to step up in there. Rumber, which is like lumber with an R, we do quite a bit of rumber on our end, and I think several other manufacturers use it as well. It's pretty common. I have seen isolated cases on gooseneck models. Goosenecks generally sit up higher off the ground than what a bumper pull does, just because the tires are normally larger, the frame is thicker, because it's carrying more weight, it's longer, and the axles are a larger capacity. So for those reasons, you could have a higher trailer. And I remember particularly, I had a client, I think it was down in Florida, that ordered a gooseneck. She didn't order the ramp. And she had some issues with her horse slipping, trying to step up onto a lumber floor with no shaving, no mat, no anything in there. But other clients have done it. They added the shavings and that took care of it. So just something to be aware of. The majority of trailers that we roll out are ramp load. Most folks tend to like those. And another thing to look at is where the ramp is mounted. So you can imagine if the higher the ramp is mounted from the ground, the steeper the incline is going to be for the horse to get in and out of the trailer. And we've been fortunate over the years on what we build. We actually mount the ramp below the door. So when the horse is walking up the ramp, I think there's probably a 3-inch lip or step they'll go over. And it's not an issue. We've never had any problems with it. But the advantage is it keeps that ramp at a lower pivot point to the ground. It reduces the incline, which reduces the chance of slippage as you're loading and unloading. And another advantage too, a lot of ramps, if you were to pull a measuring tape, the height of the ramp, like the actual metal portion that you lift up and down, most of those are probably 48 inches. And you need the longer ramp so that when you lay it on the ground, it kind of reduces that incline so the horse doesn't slip. By mounting it at a lower pivot point, we've been able to build 36 and 40-inch ramps. And, I guess a disadvantage of a ramp that we hear often is the springs will fatigue over time. They're all spring loaded. It's not an exact science on that. You get various tensions from spring manufacturers. They may vary from builder to builder. And then, of course, the number of springs that you put on makes a huge difference. If you put too many and you lay the ramp down, it doesn't quite touch the ground. You guys have probably seen that. If you don't put enough, it flops down on the ground pretty hard. But to try to lift it, you don't have as much assistance there. So I have seen some ramps that tend to get heavy as the springs fatigue. And another advantage of keeping it at a 36-inch ramp, it's just much lighter, and we just don't have the complaints as far as, hey, the ramp is too heavy and I don't like it, that type thing. One of the questions that came through, let me just read that on the screen. Maintenance and durability of both. Obviously, for a step up, there's no maintenance on that. For a ramp, the main thing would be to grease the spring and the hinge rod itself. It's typically a pretty good size diameter piece of metal of some sort, aluminum or steel. And penetrating oil is your friend on the springs. Just some WD-40 and just keep the thing lubed up and you'll be fine. I have seen folks that never add a smidge of grease or lubricating oil to the ramp. And over time, things man-made, they tend to deteriorate and corrode from the elements. And unfortunately, once it freezes up and you lay the ramp up or down, you're just going to break something. And then you're at a repair shop for potentially costly repair. Another question that came through, a listener asked, could she add a ramp to an existing trailer? And yes, that's possible for sure. It's going to vary tremendously across the board depending on the manufacturer and how the trailer was built. But, any qualified trailer repair shop, particularly one that does welding and fabrication of some sort, they would be able to, let's say if you have a Featherlight brand, for example, it's possible the dealer could reach out to Featherlight Manufacturing and say, hey, I need a ramp ship. The dealer gets it in. And then in order to install that and make it work, you're probably going to have to remove the rubber bumper that's across the back underneath the doors. You're going to have to weld some sort of block or metal across underneath the doors where that rubber was. and then you could either bolt or weld the ramp to that piece of material, depending on which option you went through. So that's sort of the process to go through. Certainly much less expensive to have a ramp done at the time of build versus trying to add one. They're very bulky. They're a bit heavy, so shipping is pretty ridiculous, and then you have to pay the labor to have that installed as well. Another question: the best material for trailer ramps. What's worked well for us is it's actually used in industrial manufacturing. It's a conveyor belt. It has a lot of grip to it, and because we have that low angle, that low incline, lower pivot point, it seems to work very well. It's just a rubber type material. The horse can get a bite with the hoof when loading and unloading, and I just don't see slippage on those. I have seen some manufacturers in the past, again, on a living quarter trailer where it's jacked up really high off the ground, which it should be, so you don't, bust your holding tanks underneath. But the ramp ended up being fairly steep, so the incline was more than what we'd generally like to see. And I've seen manufacturers sort of weld like maybe a half-inch diameter rod that runs from side to side of the ramp. So it would go from, the left side to the right side. And they sort of position those maybe about every 10 inches apart with the thinking, and then it's covered with rubber. So it's not a smooth surface. So it actually, has some humps and grooves to it, if you will. And those seem to work fine as well. Last question we saw: how to make my trailer ramp less slippery. So if it's an existing ramp, depending on what type of surface it has, I would assume it's rubber. If not, you'll definitely need to add some. If it has the rubber surface and the incline is still steep enough that you're seeing some slippage from the horse, I would get with the trailer shop and consider maybe just bolting some flat bar on top of the rubber, just something exterior so that it's not a flat surface, so that it would have some grooves in it, and then that way the hoof could get a bite on that groove as you're loading and unloading. And then of course obviously just make sure that it's safe and the edges are smooth and not sharp and things of that nature. If you have more questions on ramps or step ups, drop me an email, brad@doubledtrailers.com, and I'll be happy to throw in my 2 cents worth on that. Thanks for your time.